Well, it's a fabulous February 1st, 2025. We're here to run through Leviticus 13 through 15. It's another great month. A lot of new beginnings, I'm sure. I feel like I've got a lot to say, but I don't have a lot to say, probably. Just thank you for being here. I know being a Christian, especially in modern times, is a lot harder to do. There's so many distractions out there, and it's going against the grain. So you're taking the harder path, and I'm proud of you. Thank you for being here. I'm proud of you for being here with me, reading the Bible every day. Uh, it's not the easiest thing to read. It's confusing a little bit. There's a whole lot of laws, things to remember, a lot of moving parts, people to keep up with. But like I said, it's the harder path, and there's only one way to get closer to the Lord, and that's through this book. If you missed last episode, we just basically got more laws concerning life, and with everybody in the tabernacle and the sacrifices and foods that are forbidden, unclean animals, a woman after childbirth, and then people dying because they lit up unholy fire, I guess, from Nadab and Abihu. And it looks like we're going to just be diving into some more laws. So let's get this under the way. It's going to be a little bit of a lengthy one. So just bear with me here, and I'll get through it. And I got some water. My throat gets a little dry. You can't judge me based on my cup. It's a nice cup. All right, on to Leviticus 13, the law concerning leprosy. And Moses, speaking with the Lord, and Aaron, and the Lord said, when a man has on the skin of his body a swelling, a scab, or a bright spot, and it becomes on the skin of his body like a leprous sore, that he shall be brought to Aaron the priest, or to one of his sons the priests. The priest shall examine the sore on the skin of the body, and if hair is on the sore, has turned white, and the sore appears to be deeper than the skin of the body, it is a leprous sore. Then the priest shall examine him and pronounce him unclean. But if the bright spot is white on the skin of the body and does not appear to be deeper than the skin, and its hair has not been turned white, then the priest shall isolate the one who has the sore for 7 days. And a priest shall examine him on the 7th day, and indeed, if the sore appears to be as it was, and the sore has not spread on the skin, then the priest shall isolate him another 7 days. Then the priest shall examine him again on the 7th day, so really the 14th day, the second 7th. And indeed, if the sore has faded, and the sore has not spread on the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him clean, as it's only a scab, and he shall wash his clothes and be clean. But if the scab should at all spread over the skin, after he has been seen by the priest for his cleansing, then he shall be seen by the priest again. And if the priest sees that the scab has indeed spread on the skin, and the priest shall pronounce him unclean, as it is leprosy. When the leprous sore is on a person, then he shall be brought to the priest. And the priest shall examine him, and indeed, if the swelling on the skin is white, and it has turned the hair white, and there is a spot of raw flesh in the swelling, it is an old leprosy on the skin of his body. The priest shall also pronounce him unclean, and shall not isolate him, for he is unclean. And if leprosy breaks out all over the skin, and the leprosy covers all the skin of the one who has the sore, from his head to his foot, wherever the priest looks, then the priest shall consider indeed it is leprosy covering his body, and he shall pronounce him unclean who has the sores. And it has all turned white, then he is clean. Come on. He shall pronounce him clean who has the sore. Oh, okay. As it has turned white, then he is clean. So I guess if all the leprosy covers the body head to toe, he shall pronounce him clean. If it's all turned white, maybe. But, caveat, when the raw flesh appears on the guy, he shall be unclean. And the priest shall examine the raw flesh and pronounce him to be unclean, for the raw flesh is unclean, it is leprosy. Or, if the raw flesh changes and turns white again, he shall come to the priest, and the priest shall examine him. And indeed, if the sore has turned white, then the priest shall pronounce him clean who has the sore. He is clean. So I guess if it's not like an open wound with the leprosy, and it's turned white, and it's just scarring, maybe, then you're clean. But if you're unclean if you see raw flesh. So onward. If the body develops a boil on the skin and it's healed, and in the place of the boil there comes a white swelling or a bright spot, reddish white, then it shall be shown to the priest. And if the priest, when he sees it, indeed appears deeper than the skin, and the hair has turned white, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean, as it's a leprous sore which has broken out of the boil. But if the priest examines it, and there are no white hairs in it, and is not deeper than the skin, but has faded, then the priest shall isolate him another 7 days. And it shall be at all spread over the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean, as it's leprous. So if that boil spreads, they're going to consider it leprous. But if the bright spot stays in one place and has not spread, it is a scar of the boil, and the priest shall pronounce that guy clean. Or if the body receives a burn on its skin by fire, and the raw flesh of the burn becomes a bright spot, reddish white or just white, then the priest shall examine it, and indeed if the hair of the bright spot has turned white, and it appears deeper than the skin, it is leprosy broken out of the burn. Therefore the priest shall pronounce him unclean, as it is a leprous sore. But if the priest examines it, and indeed there are no white hairs in the spot, and it's not deeper than the skin, but has faded, then the priest shall isolate him 7 days, and the priest shall examine him again on the 7th day. If it has appeared all over the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean, as his leprosy. But if the bright spot stays in the same place and has not spread all over the skin, but has faded, it is a swelling from the burn, the priest shall pronounce him clean, for it is just the scar from the burn. If a man or a woman has a sore on the head of or their beard, I don't know how you'd have a sore in your beard. Maybe it's on the skin in your beard. Then the priest shall examine the sore, and indeed if it appears deeper than the skin, and there is in it yellow hair, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean, as it's a scaly leprosy of the head or beard. Okay, so I guess maybe through the head or the beard. But if the priest examines the scaly sore, and indeed does not appear deeper than the skin, and there is no black hair in it, then the priest shall isolate the one who has the scale for 7 days. And on the 7th day the priest shall examine the sore, and indeed if the scale has not spread, and there is no yellow hair in it, and the scale does not appear deeper than the skin, he shall shave himself, but the scale he shall not shave. And the priest shall isolate the one who has the scale for another 7 days. On the 7th day the priest shall examine the scale, and indeed if the scale has not spread over the skin, and does not appear deeper than the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him clean. He shall wash his clothes and be clean. But if the scale should at all spread over the skin after his cleansing, then the priest shall examine him, and indeed if the scale has spread over the skin, the priest need not seek for yellow hair, he is unclean. But if the scale appears to be in the standstill, there's black hair growing up in it, then the scale has healed, he is clean, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. If a man or a woman has bright spots on the skin of the body, specifically white bright spots, then the priest shall look, and indeed if the bright spots on the skin of the body are dull white, it is a white spot that grows on the skin, he is clean. As for the man whose hair has fallen from his head, he is bald, but he is clean. He whose hair has fallen from his forehead, he is bald on the forehead, but he is clean. And if there is on the bald head or the bald forehead a reddish white sore, it is a leprosy breaking out on his bald head or his bald forehead. Then the priest shall examine it, and if indeed the swelling from the sore is a reddish white on his bald head or on his bald forehead, as an appearance of leprosy on the skin, he is a leprous man. He is unclean, the priest shall surely pronounce him unclean, his sore is on his head. Now the leper on whom the sore is, his clothes shall be torn, and his head bare, and he shall cover his mustache and cry, Unclean, unclean. He shall be unclean all the days he has the sore, and he shall be unclean. He is unclean, and he shall be dwelling alone. His dwelling shall be outside of the camp. So, I guess as long as you have leprosy, you're supposed to announce to everybody that you're unclean and kind of be isolated from everybody until you get all healed up. Now, maybe this is like a modern human thought, but it's like there's not a lot of science behind this, so it could be a lot of different things, but they're calling it leprosy. And I'm no doctor, I'm not exactly like sure what exactly is leprosy, if it's like a wide array of things or just like a specific one thing. I'm gonna have to look into that. But so far, that's the rules concerning leprosy so far. We've got a little section left in Leviticus 13, the law governing leprous garments. So, Leviticus 13:47. Also, if a garment has a leprous plague in it, whether it is woolen garment or linen garment, whether it is the wrap or woof of linen or wool, whether in leather or in anything made of leather, and if the plague is greenish or reddish in the garment or in the leather, whether in the wrap or the woof or anything made of leather, it is a leprous plague and shall be shown to the priest. If the priest shall examine the plague and isolate that which has the plague for 7 days. And he shall examine the plague on the 7th day. If the plague has spread in the garment, either in the wrap or the woof, in the leather or anything made of leather, the plague is an active leprosy, it is unclean. So I'm not too sure what it's a warp, W-A-R-P, or in the woof, W-O-O-F. I'm not sure what the warp or the woof is regarding a garment, but yeah, we'll have to look into that. So, onward. He shall therefore burn that garment in which the plague, whether warp or woof, in the wool or linen or anything made of leather, for it is an active leprosy, the garment shall be burned in the fire. But if the priest examines it, and indeed the plague has not spread in the garment, either in the warp or the woof, or in anything made of leather, then the priest shall command that they wash the thing in which is the plague, and he shall isolate it for another 7 days. Then the priest shall examine the plague after it has been washed, and indeed, if the plague has not changed its color, though the plague has not spread, it is unclean, and you shall burn it in the fire. It continues eating away the cloth, whether the damage is inside or outside of it. If the priest examines it, and indeed the plague has faded after washing it, then he shall tear out of the garment, whether out of the warp or the woof, or out of the leather. I guess they tear out the bad spot. But if it appears again in the garment, either in the warp or the woof, or in anything made of leather, it is spreading the plague. You shall burn it in the fire in which is the plague. And you shall wash the garment, and if you shall wash the garment, either warp or the woof, or whatever is made of leather, if the plague has disappeared from it, then it shall be washed a second time and shall be considered clean. This is the law of leprous plague in a garment of wool or linen, either in a wrap or woof, or in anything made of leather, to pronounce it clean or to pronounce it unclean. And I wonder if when they're washing it, say it's there's a plague in the garment and they're washing it. Does it spread to them? I don't know. Well, that's Leviticus 13. On to Leviticus 14. The ritual for cleansing healed lepers. Oh, but I had a side thought. I know it's the rule to bring it to the priest, but couldn't the regular folk just kind of monitor something themselves and see if it's leprous or spreading or not? But it's not up to them, I guess. Anyways, Leviticus 14, the ritual for cleansing healed lepers. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, This shall be the law of the leper for the day of his cleansing. He shall be brought to the priest, and if the priest shall go out of the camp, and the priest shall examine him, and indeed if the leprosy is healed in the leper, And the priest shall command to take him, for he is to be cleansed, 2 living and clean birds, cedar wood, scarlet, and hyssop. Oh, it says, then the priest shall command to take him, who is to be cleansed, 2 living and clean birds, cedar wood, scarlet, and hyssop. And the priest shall command that one of the birds be killed in an earthen vessel over running water. And the priest shall command that one of the birds be killed in an earthen vessel over running water. Ah! I get caught up in like the verbiage and stuff and like trying to like read these things. But it's like in an earthen vessel, like over running water. Like just over the running water. Okay. I don't know why I was tripping up on that. Alright. As for the living bird, he shall take it, the cedar wood, and the scarlet, and the hyssop, and dip them and the living bird in the blood of the bird that was killed over the running water. And he shall sprinkle it 7 times on him who is to be cleansed from the leprosy, and shall pronounce him clean, and shall let the living bird loose in the open field. He who is to be cleansed shall wash his clothes, shave off all his hair, and wash himself in the water, that he may be clean. After that he shall come up to the camp, and shall stay outside of his tent for 7 days. But on the 7th day he shall shave all the hair on his head, and his beard, and his eyebrows, all the hair he shall shave off. He shall wash his clothes, and wash his body in the water, and he shall be clean. I wonder if he's supposed to like shave his arms and legs too. Maybe. On the 8th day he shall take 2 male lambs without blemish, 1 ewe lamb on the 1st year without blemish, 3/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil as a grain offering, and 1 log of oil. Then the priest who makes him clean shall present the man who is to be made clean and those things before the Lord at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. And the priest shall take 1 male lamb and offer it as a trespass offering, and the log of oil, and wave them as a wave offering before the Lord. I wonder if like log is just like a measurement. Then he shall kill the lamb in the place where he kills the sin offering and the burnt offering in a holy place, for as the sin offering is the priest's, so is the trespass offering. It is most holy. Before I move on, let me think. I was going to bring up something. I don't know, maybe I lost it. We move on. The priest shall take some of the blood of the trespass offering, and the priest shall put it on the tip of the right ear of him who is to be cleansed, on the right of his, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. And the priest shall take some of the log of oil and pour it into the palm of his own left hand. Then the priest shall dip his right finger in the oil that is in the left hand, and shall sprinkle some of the oil with his finger 7 times before the Lord. So I don't know if that means like the index finger. And the rest of the oil that's in his left hand, the priest shall put some on the tip of the right ear of him who is to be cleansed, and on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot, on the blood of the trespass offering. Then the rest of the oil that is in the priest's left hand he shall put on the head of him who is to be cleansed. So the priest shall make atonement for him before the Lord. Then the priest shall offer the sin offering and make atonement for him who is to be cleansed from his uncleanness. Afterward he shall kill the burnt offering. And the priest shall offer the burnt offering and the grain offering on the altar. So the priest shall make atonement for him, and he shall be clean. But if he is poor and cannot afford it, then he shall take 1 male lamb as a trespass offering to be waved, to make atonement for him, 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil as a grain offering, a log of oil, and 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, such he is able to afford. One shall be a sin offering, and the other a burnt offering. And I wonder, like, when it says like a lamb without blemish on the first year, like obviously I guess like it can't be like a year old, but like without blemish, I wonder if that mean like no like obvious defects on the animal, or what that means, like no scars. But also like when it says like what they can afford, is that like, you know, what they can get with like all their money, or like just like something they have, or can they afford it by like not like putting themselves into like a bind about like not having like enough food, or like taking in like too much from their flock. I don't know. But we move on. He shall bring the offerings to the priest on the 8th day for his cleansing to the door of the tabernacle of meeting before the Lord, and the priest shall take the lamb of the trespass offering and the log of oil, and the priest shall wave them as a wave offering before the Lord. So I don't know exactly what a wave offering is. I really need to look this up. But he shall take the lamb and the log of oil. So is he like holding the lamb? I don't know. Then he shall kill the lamb of the trespass offering, and the priest shall take some of the blood of the trespass offering and put it on the tip of the right ear of him who is to be cleansed, and on the thumb of his right hand, and on the toe of his right foot. And the priest shall pour some of the oil into the palm of his own left hand. Then the priest shall sprinkle with his right finger some of the oil that is left in his left hand 7 times before the Lord. And the priest shall put some of the oil that is in the hand of the tip of the right ear for him to be cleansed, and the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot, on the place where the blood of the trespass offering. So you got some blood and some oil on your right ear, right thumb, and your right big toe. And I wonder what it is about like the right side, and why the priest has to have like the oil or blood or whatever in his left hand, and then he has to like apply it with his right. Is like the right side of you more holy? Sure. All right. And then the rest of the oil that is in the priest's hand, he shall put on the head of him who is to be cleansed, and to make atonement for him before the Lord. And he shall offer one of the turtle doves or one of the young pigeons, such as he can afford, such as he is able to afford, the one as a sin offering and the other as a burnt offering, with the grain offering. So the priest shall make atonement for him who is to be cleansed before the Lord. This is the law for the one who has a leprous sore, who cannot afford the usual cleansing. On to Leviticus 14:33. The law concerning leprous houses. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, when you have come into the land of Canaan, which I give you as a possession, I will put the leprous plague in a house in the land of your possession. I'm going to read that again. When you have come into the land of Canaan, which I give you as a possession, and I put the leprous plague in a house in the land of your possession, and he who owns the house comes and tells the priest, saying, it seems to me that there is some plague in the house, then the priest shall command that they empty the house before the priest goes into it and examines the plague, that all that is in the house may not be made unclean. And afterward the priest shall go in to examine the house. Man. All this reading. And so it has like a little asterisk out here about the leprosy, and it says a decomposition by mildew, mold, dry rot, etc. And so in verses 34 through 53. So it says, once like this guy thinks that there's maybe leprosy like just growing in the house, then the priest shall command that they empty the house before the priest goes into the house to examine the plague, that all that is in the house may not be made unclean. And afterward the priest shall go in to examine the house. I'm having a hard time like deciphering that, but I'm just going to continue. And so the priest shall examine the plague, and indeed, if the plague is on the walls of the house with ingrained streaks, greenish or reddish, which appear to be deep in the wall, then the priest shall go out of the house to the door of the house and shut the house for 7 days. The priest shall come again on the seventh day and look in. Indeed, if the plague is spread on the walls of the house, then the priest shall command that they take away the stones in which is the plague, and they shall cast them into an unclean place outside the city. So maybe there's like a waste yard. They're demolishing the house, perhaps. And he shall cause the house to be scraped or scraped inside all around, and the dust that they scrape off, they shall pour it out into an unclean place outside the city. Then they shall take other stones and put them in the place of those stones. And he shall take the other mortar and plaster the house. Now, if the plague comes back and breaks out in the house, after he has taken away the stones, after he scraped the house, after it is plastered, then the priest shall come and look, and indeed, if the plague has spread in the house, it is an active leprosy in the house, it is unclean, and he shall break down the house, its stones, its timber, and all the plaster in the house, and he shall carry them outside the city to an unclean place. Moreover, he who goes into the house at all while it is shut up shall be unclean until evening. And he who lies down in the house shall wash his clothes, and he who eats in the house shall wash his clothes. But if the priest comes in and examines it, and indeed the plague has not spread in the house after the house was plastered, then the priest shall pronounce the house be clean, because the plague has healed. And he shall take to cleanse the house 2 birds, cedar wood, scarlet, and hyssop, and he shall kill one of the birds in an earthen vessel over running water. And he shall take the cedar wood, the hyssop, the scarlet, and the living bird, and dip them in the blood of the slain bird and in the running water, and sprinkle the house 7 times. Yep. And he shall cleanse the house with the blood of the bird and the running water, and the living bird with the cedar wood and hyssop and the scarlet. Then he shall let the living bird loose outside the city in an open field to make atonement for the house, and it shall be clean. This is the law of any leprous sore, and scale for the leprosy of a garment, and of a house for a dwelling, and a scab, and a bright spot, to teach when it is unclean and when it is clean. This is the law of leprosy. So that was a lot, guys. That was just Exodus 13 and 14. We still got 15 to go. But yeah, I don't know how important it is to just like really keep track of all this stuff. But like while we're going through it, I think it's important to just kind of pause and think, and maybe try to find some kind of symbolism, or just like kind of like know like what these people were going through, and just all these like little details that they had to remember all the time. And I don't know, to me it sounds like they're like exposing themselves to get leprosy when they're cleaning this stuff with the leprosy and trying to like decide if it's even leprous. Yeah, let me know what y'all think. On to Leviticus 15. Okay, this one's not too long. It's like a page and a half. The law concerning bodily discharges. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, When any man has a discharge from his body, his discharge is unclean. I don't know if that's like pus from a sore, or any other excretions or earwax. I don't know. But I'm also confused how it's always saying, the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying this. Like where's he talking to him at? Is it like just like in the tabernacle? Like it's not saying like where he's speaking to him at. Is it like in their dreams? Is it just all through Moses? Maybe I missed something. Y'all let me know. So, when a man has a discharge from his body, he is unclean, and this shall be his uncleanliness in regard to his discharge, whether his body runs with his discharge, or his body is stopped up by his discharge. It is his uncleanliness. Every bed is unclean on which he who has the discharge lies, and everything on which he sits shall be unclean. And whoever touches his bed shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until evening. He who sits on anything which he who has discharged sat shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until evening. And he who touches the body of him who has the discharge shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until evening. If he who has the discharge spits on him who is clean, then he shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until evening. Any saddle on which he who has the discharge rides on shall be unclean. Whoever touches anything that was under him shall be unclean until evening. He who carries any of those things shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until evening. And whomever the one who has the discharge touches and has not rinsed his hand in water, he shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until evening. The vessel of earth that he who has the discharge touches shall be broken, and every vessel of wood shall be rinsed in water. And I guess that's like a vase or something, like something to like hold water or food. And when he who has the discharge is cleansed of his discharge, then he shall count for himself 7 days for his cleansing. Then he shall count for himself 7 days for his cleansing, wash his clothes, and bathe his body in running water. Then he shall be clean. On the 8th day he shall take for himself 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, and come before the Lord to the door of the tabernacle, place of meeting, and give them to the priests. Then the priest shall offer them as one a sin offering and the other a burnt offering. So the priest shall make atonement for him before the Lord because of his discharge. And maybe the discharge like is the leprosy, like referring to that. But yeah, like what if you like don't know these people have the discharge and you like sit where they're at? Like what happens to you? And why is it like unclean until evening? Like, are you just like not holy, like unclean, or is it like a sanitation, like you're not clean? But that doesn't sound very, scientific if you're like you're just not clean until evening, even if the stuff's still on you. But anyway, if any man has an emission of semen, then he shall wash all his body in water, and he shall be unclean until evening. And any garment and any leather on which there is semen, it shall be washed with water and be unclean until evening. Also, when a woman lies with a man and there's an emission of semen, they shall bathe in water and be unclean until evening. If a woman has discharge, and if the discharge from her body is blood, she shall be set apart 7 days, and whomever she touches shall be unclean until evening. Everything that she lies on during her impurity shall be unclean also. Everything that she sits on shall be unclean. And maybe like I guess this is like referring to like a woman's period. Whoever touches her bed shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until evening. And whoever touches anything that she sat on shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until evening. If anything is on her bed or on anything on which she sits, when he touches it, he shall be unclean until evening. And if any man lies with her at all, so that her impurity is on him, he shall be unclean 7 days. And every bed on which he lies shall be unclean. If a woman has discharge of blood for many days other than the time of her customary impurity, or if any of it runs beyond her usual time of impurity, all the days of her unclean discharge shall be as the days of her customary impurity. She shall be unclean. So I guess if it lasts a little bit longer than usual, well, it's just going to prolong the uncleanliness period. Every bed on which she lies, all the days of her discharge shall be to her as the bed of her impurity. And whatever she sits on shall be her, and whatever she sits on shall be unclean, and the uncleanliness of her impurity. Whoever touches those things shall be unclean. He shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until evening. But if she is cleansed of her discharge, then she shall count for herself 7 days. After that she shall be clean. And on the 8th day she shall take for herself 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, and bring them on the priest or to the priest at the tabernacle. Then the priest shall offer one as a sin offering and the other as a burnt offering, and the priest shall make atonement for her before the Lord for the discharge of her uncleanness. Thus you shall separate the children of Israel from their uncleanness, lest they die in their uncleanness when they defile my tabernacle that is among them. This is the law for one who has a discharge, for him who emits semen and is unclean thereby, and for her who is indisposed because of her customary impurity, and for one who has a discharge, either a man or a woman, and for him who lies with her who is unclean. Yeah, that's a lot. I don't know. I feel like a lot of times it raises more questions than giving answers. But like these are the laws back in the day before the New Testament, before like the New Covenant and God's promise. So yeah, like I said, it's important to like learn the history of everything. And I couldn't see people following all these rules nowadays. But yeah, that's gonna do it. Imagine being a woman and having to go through that every month. That'd be rough. But yeah, thank y'all for tuning in. It's a good long start to February. But yeah, we've got to do it. We got to power through. Appreciate y'all. Like always, I sincerely do. Thank you if you made it this far in the video. I know that one was really lengthy. Just make sure, get the word out. Like, comment, subscribe. And I'll be here for you tomorrow at some time. Thank you.